Hey, this is Dave DeCamp from antiwar.com. This is anti-war news for Thursday, May 8th, 2025. All right, the first story at the top of antiwar.com today, the IDF lists hostages as the least important goal. So the Israeli military has listed the return of the remaining Israeli captives in Gaza as its least important goal in its plans for an escalated assault on the Strip. And this was reported by Haaretz on Wednesday. So according to the report, retrieving the hostages was placed last in a list of 6 objectives. And those 6 objectives include number 1, defeating Hamas. Number 2, operational control over the territory, which means full military occupation. Number 3, demilitarizing the territory. Number 4, striking Hamas government targets. Number 5, concentrating and moving the population. And number 6, the last goal, the least important goal, is returning the captives. So news of the Israeli military's goals comes after Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu admitted that retrieving the hostages was not his priority. And this is something that's been clear for a very long time, but it has not been explicitly stated by Netanyahu until last week. So the Israeli military finalized plans for the expanded offensive dubbed Gideon's Chariot on Tuesday and Wednesday after the government approved the escalation. The purpose of the expanded assault is to achieve the full military occupation of Gaza and concentrate the entire civilian population into a tiny area of southern Gaza with the goal of forcing them to leave to achieve ethnic cleansing. The inclusion of concentrating and moving the population as the 5th goal in the Israeli military's list, I mean, that makes clear that ethnic cleansing is a higher priority than getting the hostages out. So, and I think this has been clear for a long time, and this is what the Israeli government wants to do. And I think, the reason why I wanted to make this the top story, I just think this is important for just because the narrative that you still see, I mean, in the U.S. and from Israel supporters is, just release the hostages, as if this has been about the hostages anytime recently. I mean, if it was about the hostages, Israel would have implemented the full ceasefire deal to get them all out, or would have accepted Hamas's offer that they would release all the hostages at once for a permanent ceasefire deal. But it's very clearly not about the hostages. And I just put in this quote from Smotrich, what he said the other day, and he seems to be very influential in drafting these plans. He said, quote, "The Gazan citizens will be concentrated in the south. They will be totally despairing, understanding that there is no hope and nothing to look for in Gaza, and will be looking for relocation to begin a new life in other places," end quote. So, I saw Trump said, I think this was on Wednesday, he said there's going to be a big announcement related to Gaza within 24 hours. So who knows exactly what that's going to be. It might be something with the aid. From what I've seen, it seems like they're going to try to use the aid to move the population, say, okay, we're handing out aid in this little area in southern Gaza. I mean, I don't know. Hopefully there's a real relief effort. It's hard to be optimistic at this point, but there just something's got to give here. And, with this Trump administration, the one thing about it is things come out of nowhere. Even though things seem incredibly bleak right now, maybe there's a chance of some kind of miracle happening. But I wouldn't bet on it. All right, so the next one here, Trump considering a U.S.-led Iraq-style occupation of Gaza. So this article is from Responsible Statecraft by Ben Armbruster, and it's based on a Reuters report that I almost don't believe. I mean, it's so out there. So I'm just going to read from Ben's article here. The Trump administration is reportedly considering a plan for the U.S. to lead the administration of Gaza after Israel's siege, similar to how Washington ran Iraq after the 2003 American invasion. Reuters reports that there have been high-level discussions centered around a transitional government headed by a U.S. official that would oversee Gaza until it had been demilitarized and stabilized and a viable Palestinian administration had emerged. This is from the report. The sources who spoke on the condition of anonymity, as they were not authorized to discuss the talks publicly, compared the proposal to the coalition provisional authority in Iraq that Washington established in 2003, shortly after the U.S.-led invasion that toppled Saddam Hussein. So they're actually comparing it to Iraq, to the invasion of Iraq, what they established right after. And most experts cite the CPA, this administration, as the catalyst for an impending insurgency that mired the U.S. military in war in Iraq for more than a decade, from which hundreds of thousands were killed at a cost of upwards of $3 trillion. So yeah, I mean, it's just incredible that this is what they're citing here. So like the U.S.-led war in Iraq, Reuters adds that there would be no fixed timeline for how long such a U.S.-led administration would last, while a U.S.-led provisional authority in Gaza would draw Washington deeper into the Israeli-Palestinian conflict and mark its biggest Middle East intervention since the Iraq invasion. Quincy Institute research fellow Anel Sheline called the idea appalling and absurd. And Trita Parsi also, had similar comments. He said, quote, "If this is true, then it is a complete turn to the policies of the Bush administration in terms of occupying Middle Eastern land. It's the opposite of what Trump promised the American people in terms of bringing troops home and disentangling the U.S. from the region. It also shows that as long as Israel's occupation of the Palestinian territories continues, which is the root cause of the violence, the U.S. will always face pressure to be pulled back into the Middle East," end quote. So again, this sounds totally insane. And I guess under this plan, the Palestinians would remain in Gaza and the U.S. would occupy them. Or I guess they would probably want to try to get some Palestinians out of there. But it's hard to believe that this is real. It's just insane, just based on this Reuters report so far. All right, so the next one here, U.S. Gaza Pier operation was more than a flop. It was a gigantic hazard. So this is another article from Responsible Statecraft from Kelly Vlahos. So there's a new Inspector General report about this Gaza Pier, the aid pier that President Biden ordered. One of the most absurd things that he did in his presidency. Instead of pressuring Israel to to bring more aid into Gaza, through the land border crossings, he ordered the construction of a pier, and it cost $320 million. And it was just a complete disaster. It barely got any aid in. So a new Inspector General report finds that the pier operation, which took place for several months in the spring of 2024, was a bigger failure than earlier reported. It was also a gigantic hazard. According to the Washington Post, which reported about this, some 62 military personnel were injured, exact causes still unknown, and one Army soldier, Sergeant Quandarius Stanley, was killed in a forklift accident, dying from his injuries 5 months later. And I remember when that happened. So 62 military personnel were injured. The operation cost U.S. taxpayers $320 million, but barely any assistance, if any, actually got to the Gazans at the heart of the mission. Meanwhile, according to the IG, more than 24 U.S. watercraft and other equipment were damaged in a 3-month time period, causing $31 million in repairs. So again, just a total disaster, and as Kelly says here, a huge hazard for the American military personnel involved in this. And I know, from when it was happening, it kept getting knocked out because it was in the Eastern Mediterranean, which the seas can get pretty rough there. And apparently this was basically a floating dock that could only handle a foot or two, waves a foot or two high. And, it was just much rougher than that. So just a complete disaster. And I remember there was another report basically saying how this, this took the pressure off Israel to let more aid in, because Biden's saying, we'll take care of it with this pier. So it's just really, the whole thing was just crazy. All right, so the next one here, World Central Kitchen halts operations in Gaza. So the World Central Kitchen, a U.S.-based charity, said on Wednesday that it was forced to shut down aid operations in Gaza due to the total Israeli blockade on the Palestinian territory. So the WCK said in a statement on its website, quote, after serving more than 130 million total meals and 26 million loaves of bread over the past 18 months, World Central Kitchen is no longer has the supplies to cook meals or bake bread in Gaza. Since Israel closed border crossings in early March, WCK has been unable to replenish the stocks of food that we use to feed hundreds of thousands of Gazans daily, end quote. So you see this picture here. This is one of the children suffering from malnutrition in Gaza. His name is Osama El Rakep, and I believe he has cystic fibrosis, which means he needs like real nutrition and it's just not available. I remember in 2024 when the food shortages were kind of at their worst and a few kids and some kids died, that we knew of, died of malnutrition. I remember there was a few of them that had cystic fibrosis. So it's the ones with these health problems that die first. So the charity said that in recent weeks, its teams in Gaza, quote, stretched every remaining ingredient and fuel source using creativity and determination, but has now reached the limits of what is possible, end quote. So WCK field kitchens in Gaza have run out of ingredients, and a mobile bakery that it had there has run out of flour. The charity said that it has trucks loaded with food and cooking fuel ready to enter Gaza, but they're being blocked by Israel. And UN aid agencies have also said they have thousands of aid trucks ready to get in. But Israel has maintained the blockade, even as we've seen reports of children dying, starving to death, dying of malnutrition. So at least 11, as far as I was able to find, at least 11 WCK, World Central Kitchen workers have been killed by Israeli attacks since October 7th, 2023. The most notorious attack took place on April 1st, 2024, when an Israeli drone fired missiles at 3 clearly marked cars carrying WCK employees who were traveling on a route previously approved by the IDF. If you don't remember how this went down, there were 7 World Central Kitchen workers in 3 different cars driving on a route that was pre-approved by the Israeli military. An Israeli missile hit one of the cars. Their survivors from that car got into a second car. An Israeli missile hit that car. The survivors of that strike got into the third car, and then another missile hit, killing them all, killing all 7. I mean, what is the excuse for that? It's, just a clear targeted attack of aid workers, and these were foreign aid workers. 3 British nationals, I believe an Australian, 1 from Poland, 1 was Palestinian, and 1 was American. 33-year-old Jacob Flickinger. He was a dual U.S.-Canadian citizen, and he left behind a 1-year-old son, and he was killed in this horrific way. And also in November 2024, an Israeli attack on a car in Gaza killed 3 WCK workers. And on March 27th of this year, they said one of their volunteers was killed by a strike near one of their kitchens in Gaza. So the next one here, Israeli strikes on Gaza kill more than 60, including 2 journalists. So Israeli strikes on Gaza have killed at least 61 Palestinians since dawn on Thursday. Medical sources told Al Jazeera amid Israel's starvation blockade on the territory that has blocked food and aid shipments for more than 2 months. So according to Reuters, Israeli strikes that hit a restaurant and market in Gaza City killed at least 33 people, including women and children. A witness of the attack told Reuters, quote, people come to the market to get what they need if they can find it. Neither the people nor the animals were safe, neither the young nor the old, end quote. So according to Drop Site News, they published a report from a Palestinian in Gaza who used to go to this restaurant. This was the last restaurant that was open in Gaza City. It was one of the few places where people could find a meal. And, people are still selling flour and things at markets, but the prices are like sky high. Barely anyone can actually afford it. But you see the aftermath here of these strikes on this restaurant. And according to the Palestinian Journalists Syndicate, among the victims was Yahya Subi, a journalist who was killed hours after the birth of his daughter. And the other major Israeli attack in Gaza City hit a school-turned-shelter for displaced Palestinians in the Tufa suburb, killing at least 15. The Palestinian Journalist Syndicate said another journalist was killed in that strike named Noor al-Din Abdo. And this brings the total number of Palestinian journalists killed, according to the syndicate, since October 7th to 212, which is just a huge number. And a day earlier, as I covered yesterday, an Israeli attack hit a school sheltering displaced Palestinian civilians in the Berej refugee camp in central Gaza. Well, it was attacked again later that day, and a total of 32 people were killed in both of those strikes. Haaretz, the Israeli newspaper, reported that there's a nearby mosque near the school that was told to evacuate. They got a phone call, and some of the people from that mosque went over to the school, and then the school ended up getting hit, and the mosque wasn't hit. All right, so the next one here, Israeli war and healthcare collapse leave Gaza child unrecognizable. So this is really a sad story, and this is from Middle East Eye. So once proud of her long, silky brown hair, Rahaf Ayad now dreads combing it. She said each time she combs it, more of her hair falls out. The hair loss is just one of several changes in her body in recent months, by what her mother suspects are the result of the ongoing Israeli blockade and destruction of the Gaza Strip. The 12-year-old has become severely underweight, and her growth has visibly stalled since she was forced to live in a makeshift tent in the Zawaida in the central Gaza Strip. Her mother told Middle East Eye, quote, Rahaf was a completely normal girl. I don't even recall ever needing to take her to the hospital for any illness since she was born, end quote. And she said the condition began 8 months ago when they were displaced to this area of Gaza. At first, her mother dismissed a pain her daughter began feeling in her legs and bones as simple fatigue. But when the pain persisted longer than a week, the family sought help from Doctors Without Borders, who referred her to the Al-Aqsa Martyrs Hospital in Deir al-Balah. She was admitted for a week and received the medication and treatment, but when they returned to the tent, her health deteriorated and her body began to swell. And you can see she looks completely malnourished, and they're unable to diagnose what's wrong with her. Her mother says all they've been eating is canned food, that they don't have access to food with proper nutrition. So again, it's a health problem, and that on top of the lack of real food has done this to the little girl, and it's just really sad. And there's this picture you see of her, before this happened to her, and what she looks like now, and it's just, this stuff is just absolutely tragic. All right, so the next one here, Yemen's Houthis launched drone attack on Israel. So Yemen's Houthis, officially known as Ansar Allah, announced a drone attack on Israel on Wednesday as the group's leaders vowed that the ceasefire deal with the U.S. did not apply to operations against Israel in support of the Palestinians in Gaza. Houthi military spokesman Yahya Saree said that 2 drones targeted the Ramon airport in southern Israel, and another drone targeted the city of Jaffa. The Israeli military reported that its forces downed only 1 drone that was coming from the east. Saree also announced an attack on the U.S. aircraft carrier USS Harry Truman, which he said was carried out before the announcement of the ceasefire. And he said that attack resulted in the downing of a U.S. F-A-18 fighter jet. And he is referring to, there was the CNN report that the U.S. lost another F-18 fighter jet that fell off the Harry Truman. And that report said it could have had something to do with a shot fired from the Houthis, which that report said that it happened after Trump's announcement. But Saree is saying that the attack was before. But anyway, they lost another F-18, another $60 million jet. So Mohammed Abdul Salam, a senior Ansar Allah official, told Reuters on Wednesday that the ceasefire deal with the U.S. does not include Israel in any way, shape, or form. Saree vowed that attacks on Israel and the blockade on Israeli shipping would continue until there's a ceasefire in Gaza and an end to the Israeli blockade on Gaza. Saree said, quote, "We will continue to ban Israeli navigation in the Red and Arabian Seas and to ban air traffic at the Ben Gurion airport. Our operations will continue until the aggression against Gaza stops and the blockade is lifted. We will remain faithful and persevere blood for blood with Gaza and Palestine until victory, end quote. So President Trump on Tuesday, actually he said this on Wednesday. I need to fix that. He commended the Houthis for their resilience under U.S. attacks. He said, quote, "We take their word for it. We hit them very hard. They had a great capacity to withstand punishment. You could say there's a lot of bravery there," end quote. So as I've been, discussing a lot, the important thing to understand is that, this probably could have been accomplished, a ceasefire with the Houthis without the U.S. even bombing Yemen. They won't stop their attacks on Israel and on Israeli shipping, the blockade on Israeli shipping. But on April 10th, Dropsite News published a report, an interview with a senior Ansar Allah official who said, we would be willing to stop attacking U.S. warships if the U.S. stops bombing Yemen. And Dropsite reported on Wednesday that a source told them that the interview was noted at high levels within the Trump administration. So that interview that they published could have played a role in the ceasefire, in the U.S. agreeing to the ceasefire. So good for them for, being one of the few outlets that interviews, that'll do interviews like that, because it does make a difference. So looks like, as the Houthis said, they're not stopping their attacks on Israel. They're not going to back down on that. All right, so the next one here, Israeli drone strike kills Hamas commander in southern Lebanon. So this one's from Jason Ditz. A pre-dawn Israeli drone attack in the Lebanese city of Sidon has killed a Hamas commander. The strike was reportedly in the Villas neighborhood of Sidon near the Imam Ali Mosque. Israel identified the man as Khaled Ahmed El Ahmed and described him as a commander of Hamas's Western Brigade in Lebanon. Hamas confirmed he was a member in their own statement mourning his death, but they did not identify his role. Hamas's statement said that Ahmed was on his way to prayer at the time he was hit. And then there was other Israeli strikes where one person was wounded. So Israel's really been hitting Lebanon, and this just seems to be really going underreported, and not many people are aware of it. All right, so the next one here, Israel and Syria have engaged in secret talks. So this is another one from Jason. Israel has made much of the idea that Syria's new Islamist government is a direct threat to them as they continue to invade southern Syria and carry out regular airstrikes across the country. Quietly, they've been carrying out negotiations since at least April under UAE mediation. So there are reports that these negotiations were going on. And then Ahmad al-Shara, formerly known as Julani, he confirmed that they have had talks with Israel. He's been saying the message they've been given to the U.S. is that they want to normalize with Israel. And he's really being embraced by the West, despite being the founder of al-Qaeda in Syria. So the next story here, Shara visits France. Macron hosts Syria's de facto president on first European visit. So this article is from The Cradle. So Syria's self-appointed interim president Ahmad al-Shara met with French President Emmanuel Macron in Paris on May 7th in his first official visit to a European nation since overthrowing the previous Syrian government. You see a nice picture of Macron and Shara shaking hands and getting along with each other. And again, this guy, he's literally the founder of al-Qaeda in Syria. His history is that he joined al-Qaeda after the U.S. invasion of Iraq to join the insurgency. And then he went over to Syria, where he was basically given a mandate to start a new al-Qaeda affiliate, and he founded the al-Nusra Front. He worked with al-Baghdadi, the founder of ISIS. Then they had like a falling out. And then in 2016, he started to rebrand and declared that he was no longer affiliated with al-Qaeda. But if you see the statement, he's basically saying, he was doing it with their blessing. It's clearly for PR purposes. And then in 2017, his group turned into Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, and that's the group that took over Syria. And now he's getting a warm welcome in France. He's getting talks with U.S. officials in the UK. So he's on his way to being at who knows, maybe they'll let him into NATO or something next. All right, so the next one here, 31 killed by India's missile attack on Pakistan. So this is an update on the India-Pakistan situation, which is not looking good. So India's missile strikes on Pakistan and Pakistan-administered Kashmir have killed at least 31 people, including one child, and now the two nuclear-armed powers appear to be on the brink of a major war. So India claimed that it targeted terror camps linked to the April 22nd terrorist attack in the Pahalgam area of India-administered Kashmir. Islamabad has denied that it had any role in the attack and said that India's missile strike hit civilian areas. They're saying that all the victims, all the dead were civilians. Pakistan has claimed that it shot down 5 Indian fighter jets and drones, and there appeared to have been some evidence of that they shot down the fighter jets. And there's been heavy shelling across the line of control, which is the de facto border between the Pakistani and Indian sides of Kashmir. According to Indian officials, Pakistani shelling has killed 7 civilians on the Indian side of Kashmir. Pakistan is expected to launch a more significant response in the coming days. Pakistan's Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif said, quote, Pakistan has every right to give a robust response to this act of war imposed by India, and a strong response is indeed being given, end quote. Pakistan's defense minister warned of the risk of nuclear escalation and said, quote, if India pushes the region toward nuclear war, it will bear the full consequences, end quote. So Indian officials are warning that New Delhi will respond to any kind of retaliation from Pakistan. So there's a big risk of escalation here. It looks like Pakistan is going to do something beyond just the shelling across the line of control. And the question is, I think the big risk, India seems like they're itching for a fight. So, this might not make a difference. But I think if Pakistan, if they launch an attack in Kashmir, in Indian-administered Kashmir, there's less of a risk of escalation if they launch an attack on India. But again, it does seem like India is just ready to go here. So it's just not looking good here. And this is the deepest attack that India has launched into Pakistan since 1971, before either country had an arsenal of nuclear weapons. So again, this is very significant, what's happening here. And I'll keep a close eye on it. I feel like I kind of dropped the ball on following this after the terrorist attack and the tensions rising. But now I really hope they come back from the brink here. Whew. All right, so the next one here, J.D. Vance says that U.S.-Iran talks are on the right pathway. So Vice President J.D. Vance said on Wednesday that negotiations between the U.S. and Iran are on the right pathway, although he repeated a false claim that no other country in the world besides Iran has a nuclear enrichment program without a nuclear weapons program. And this is a talking point first used by Secretary of State Marco Rubio. So several non-nuclear armed states that are signatories to the Non-Proliferation Treaty enrich uranium at low levels, including Japan, Germany, and Brazil, and also the Netherlands. I think Argentina. I'm not positive about Argentina. But he said at the Munich Leader Conference in Washington, quote, "Let me ask this basic question. Which regime in the world has a civil nuclear power and enrichment without having a nuclear weapon? And the answer is no one," end quote. And that's just not true. Again, this is just a false claim that they're putting out there. So Vance, on one hand here, he's saying that there's progress being made in the talks. He didn't explicitly say that Iran needs to end its enrichment program, but that seems to be what he's hinting at here by making this point. It's kind of a mixed bag, but he also repeated the threat, basically referred to Trump's threat that if there is no deal reached between the U.S. and Iran, then the U.S. is going to attack Iran. So that's not good. But maybe good news is that, so the talks between the U.S. and Iran were postponed this past weekend, but Iranian media reported on Wednesday that they're rescheduled for this weekend on Saturday. So far, I don't think it's been confirmed by the U.S. or Iran, officially, but hopefully those talks happen and these things continue to make progress. All right, so the next one here, Ukrainian drones shut down Moscow airport. So this one is from Kyle Anzalone at the Libertarian Institute. So in 3 days leading up to the 80th anniversary of the Soviet Union's World War II victory over Nazi Germany, Moscow's main airports were shut down by long-range Ukrainian drones. More than 100 flights have been canceled as a number of foreign leaders are expected in Moscow for the celebration. So these attacks clearly appear to be designed to disrupt the preparation for the 80th anniversary celebrations, and several foreign leaders, including Chinese President Xi Jinping, Indian President Narendra Modi. I wonder if Modi's still going with everything going on. And then Slovak President Robert Fico, EU and a leader of a EU and NATO country. They're all planning to attend. And and then another thing. So right now it's May 8th in Russia. As far as I've seen, Russia said that the 3-day ceasefire has gone into effect. Haven't seen anything yet of reports of Ukrainian attacks after that. I have a feeling that they're just going to keep launching these drone attacks. And then, that'll mean that Russia is going to, hit Ukraine back during this time. But we'll see what happens with that 3-day ceasefire. All right, so the next one here, Israel advances settlement to kill Palestinian state. So this one's from Middle East Eye. Israel is poised to move forward with a highly contentious settler project east of Jerusalem that would effectively divide the occupied West Bank into two, according to Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich. And he said this is how they will effectively kill the Palestinian state. Those are Smotrich's words. And the project, known as the E1 plan, would involve the construction of 3,412 housing units for Israeli settlers on occupied Palestinian land. It aims to connect several settlements with occupied East Jerusalem, cutting off Palestinian communities from one another and significantly disrupting territorial continuity. The plan would isolate East Jerusalem from the West Bank, forcing Palestinians to take lengthy detours to travel between cities and towns while enabling further expansion of Israeli settlements. So they want to make life as difficult as possible for the Palestinians, cut them off from each other. And as Smotrich said, this is the plan here is to kill the Palestinian state. And this has always been the plan, the purpose of advancing these settlements. But now they just say it. They're just saying it outright. And Smotrich, he's not just the finance minister. He also has a ministry position in the defense ministry where he could advance settlements. He's essentially the occupation governor of the West Bank, and he's a West Bank settler himself. And he has long been on the record saying, that Israel's got to annex Gaza. He wants to, expel the Palestinians from the West Bank. So this is all moving along. He really has a lot of influence over what is happening in both the West Bank and Gaza. All right, so that is it for the news for today. Please go check out our viewpoints. One from Connor O'Keefe. The Trump administration is not serious about ending endless wars. One from Mohsen Madawi. I was detained for my beliefs. Who will be next? It's the Palestinian American who was detained. He's a permanent resident. He wrote in the New York Times about this. He was arrested when he was going to get his citizenship, and they released him on bail. One from Eli Clifton. ADL takes on shareholders questioning Israel arms sales. One from Belen Fernandez. From Gaza to Vietnam, what is the value of a photo? And our spotlight is from Ian Proud. Britain's coalition of the willing decides that it's unwilling. So please go check all that out. You could always support this show by liking, subscribing, commenting, follow us on social media, and all that stuff. That stuff helps out. How many more shows this week? One more show this week. So that means I will be back tomorrow with some more news. Thanks for listening.